Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final discussion board for supervision and social work. This is Muriel Petersheim, and here we go. Discussion board number 10. The pros and cons of group supervision. So I decided to examine the pros and cons of group supervision because I often reflect on these aspects as they relate to working with clients. When we're looking at specifically like the individual conferences or individual sessions versus group work, and how it parallels to the supervisory relationship. So thanks to the comprehensive literature review on group supervision by Kadushin and Harkness, 2014, we are given a thorough overview of the research on the advantages and disadvantages of group supervision. To begin, I have provided a summary of the pros to group supervision based on what was outlined in the text. You will note that I have included the primary sources with each point, but not listed is Kadushin and Harkness 2014 as the secondary source from which I obtained this content. So just as a quick overview, the pros are that that group supervision correlates positively with good working relationship, more efficient compared to individual supervision, which makes perfect sense. Greater freedom to communicate dissatisfaction with field instruction. This is specifically the supervisees. That might decrease that power imbalance where they feel like more supported by their peers. So they feel like they can express that dissatisfaction versus if they were doing an individual supervision with their supervisor. And the same goes to expressing their difference in professional ideas. There's appreciation for varying ideas, experiences, and cases through that lateral learning. The supervisees or the participants in the group supervision tend to provide mutual support for and validate each other. They learn to seek consultation from peers, the supervisees, with different values, knowledge, and skills. Again, kind of going back to that lateral learning. And it can have a lasting influence on professional competence and identity. And I should say, lastly, it promotes increased psychotherapeutic skills. So the cons, less attention and help on specific case problems, again, makes perfect sense. Can be highly task-oriented. So, for example, can be concerned with problems relating to resolving the emotional difficulties of residents, which can be really seen as a pro or con. On the one hand, this method is efficient and allows for more individualized concerns of case managers to get resolved. On the other hand, specifically when we're talking about the highly task-oriented aspect, it goes back to that, the more individualized concerns get resolved. On the other, overly structured group supervision can deflect from the purpose of group supervision, which, as described by Dwayne 2013, is to provide a safe and rejuvenating place where people can share their fears and emotional consequences of their profession and discover ways to deal with work-related stress. So Wilbur et al. 1991 described an explicitly structured format in which the supervisees submit a request for assistance statement and round-robin responses were employed. So I put this as a sub point for that highly task-oriented structure because I felt like those go hand in hand, because we all know that groups, depending on the facilitators, can look very different. They could be a little bit more informal, or they can be much more structured. So supervisees might feel less control over their own learning processes. They might prefer individual conferences to group supervision. That was actually widely stated in this particular aspect of this particular part of the chapter. It might hinder learning due to negative group interactions, competition among supervisees, so who's going to get the supervisor's attention for their specific problems. Problems with the supervisor, so lack of focus. Maybe that supervisor isn't as adept within that dynamic. There might be anxiety and poor time management. So with all that being said, trust and safety are needed to enable learning, including supervisor competence. Again, that goes hand in hand with that point. And a more positive perception of the supervisory relationship was found with individual supervision. I was unsure specifically what they meant by that, as if they felt like the the supervisee felt more fond of the supervisor. In the individual conferences, like they were better able to connect on a more in more depth or more individual have a more individualized relationship with the supervisor. But anyway, that was also a con because, again, it goes back to that the preference for individual supervision. There are some similarities between the group supervision and individual conferences. So if we're looking at that, the students that were observed or supervisees performed equally well under each when comparing practice skills, and desirable outcomes were similarly produced. So some conclusions. We know that it seems to be as effective as individual supervision with regards to attaining educational and professional development. Again, this is directly from Kadushin and Harkness, and specifically the conclusions that they drew from this literature review. It can, group supervision can impede learning depending on how sessions are facilitated, and they can be more effective in enhancing professional autonomy, even though individual supervision is preferred. And here are the references that I utilized. Again, specifically, I use Kadushin and Harkness on the chapter of group supervision, but I supplemented that content when I talked about the purpose of group supervision according to Claudia Duane. Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed.